Okay, yesterday we began talking about the concept of Zoreya and Choresh and Kotzer. Choresh means to plow, Zoreya means to plant seeds, and Kotzer means to cut them. So once they've grown. So we were in the middle of Zoreya, which is kind of the middle, which is planting seeds. And as we noted yesterday, that the key component of what, we don't plant seeds all that often. It's not, and that's not so hard for us to stay away from. But a part of this melacha that becomes a problem is watering plants. And watering plants is a big issue because, excuse me, because we're not allowed to, we're not allowed to do it because it is considered doing work on Shabbat. Now, we started talking about different ways that it could be a problem. So like one of the things that we said, obviously, I can't take out my garden hose and start watering the plants, right? So that would not be allowed in my garden or what have you. We even talked about the idea of not doing nitilat yadayim over my grass. That would also be a problem. We also talked about permitting, and this is where we closed yesterday, the idea that in Israel, a lot of the water use that a person does, whether it be turning on the sink or flushing the toilet, generates water that ultimately goes to water the plants and to water the environment in Israel. We said that's not a problem because it's indirect. So another case that is not a problem, which is to not use water, right? So what might I use, right? I might have a cup of tea or coffee or hot chocolate, as is the case for me today. And you take it and you spill it on the ground, right? That's not a problem because those things don't really water the plants in a productive way. And the same thing holds true for urination, right? To go to the bathroom, ideally we go to the, inside, but sometimes you're outside and you don't have a choice. So that too is not a problem. And there's no concern of growing anything because that's not an issue. The only case where there's a little bit of a problem, which again, this is not something that we do, but it's in the book, so I'm going to read it, is you can't defecate in a place that your product or out product, whatever it may be, would be a fertilizer. That would be a problem. I don't see that happening for any of us. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but just an interesting type of idea. Now, what we've been talking about watering, the plants, the field, and so on and so forth. For the most part, we've been thinking and talking about things that are outdoors, right? In my field, in my garden, and so on and so forth. But what about in my living room, in my kitchen, where I may have a potted plant or something of that nature? So there too, I am not allowed to water a plant, right? So if I have, whatever I have, whatever kind of plant I have that grows in some kind of flower pot or dirt, I am not allowed to on Shabbat put water into that pot. It is forbidden. Now, what else would be? So he includes another thing here, which is a greenhouse, right? Well, some version of a greenhouse. He says, you know what? Actually, before I get to the greenhouse, I'll go in the order that he has it in the book, even though I would have written it in a different order. He says in a greenhouse, sometimes they open the windows in order to, I guess, provide it with fresh air or something like that, and that's better for the plants. He says you're not allowed to do that in a greenhouse, meaning a place where they grow, where the purpose is to grow plants, trees, etc. And you open the window as part of the process of doing that, that is a problem. So obviously the question then is, well, what about my house, right? If I open the window in my living room and I have some plants there, is that a problem? So the answer is it is not a problem because that's not where it's not definitive. It's not what you're doing it for. So it becomes not a problem. There are opinions that say if you have a window that has in the windowsill a number of different plants, then you shouldn't open that window. But we will hold that you can open even that window. Again, because you're not opening the window for the purpose of the plants. You're opening the window for the air, for the heat, for the cool, or whatever it may be. Therefore, not a problem. Now, what about a classic thing that happens? You know, we have this in the shul. You have some version of bisamim or something like that. So he says that you're allowed to water the bisamim. Nothing happens as a result. You're just keeping it fresh. You're probably going to use it on Shabbat or for Havdalah or something like that. So to take the myrtle stalks that we like to use for bisamim, to take them and put them into a cup of water or to wash them off, that's fine. So too, if you have any kind of fruits or vegetables, no issue with watering them off. They're already detached. You're cleaning them. There's no purpose here. There's no benefit to them to be doing that. Yeah, Joe, question.
A timer, a sprinkler timer, like a timer.
I'm going to get there. I was waiting for that one. So that is allowed, right? But what is not allowed is if someone receives flowers, if you get flowers, if they're open already, so it's no problem to put them in the water. But if they're not open, and by putting them in the water, then they're going to open up, then this is something that we don't do. There's a big thing about if you're sending flowers to someone on Shabbat, or if you're getting flowers, you want to make sure you get them into the water before Shabbat, because a lot of times the water causes the flowers to open, and when that's the case, then we're not allowed to do that. But if they're open already, then it is allowed and it's not a problem. Okay, now. And if you did by mistake put them in without realizing, you don't have to take them out, right? Even the closed ones, you could leave them in. Let me just see what else he had here before I get. Oh, one other thing before I get to your question, Joe. So the question of, let's say I'm eating an apple or a pear or an orange, although a lot of these fruits don't have them anymore, and there's seeds in them. Right, and I'm finished with them. Can I take them and just throw them somewhere? Well, indoors, not a problem because it's not going to grow. Outdoors, it depends where you throw them. Obviously, if you throw them in Brooklyn and concrete and things like that, no problem. But what if I throw them on some patch of grass or dirt or so on and so forth? So it really depends. If it's a piece of dirt that's moist and it will absorb that seed, then no, you can't do that. But if it's just Brooklyn dirt, which is pretty hard, it's not going to take in the seed, then there's no problem with it. So it really depends on the type of dirt that you have. So like, again, a standard patch of dirt is not going to be a problem. But if you have in the front of your home, a lot of times we have sort of gardens or things like that where the earth is kind of worked a little bit, especially around the bushes and things like that, or flat where the flower bed might be, that could theoretically be a problem. So you wouldn't throw it there. Okay, Joe, you asked an important question about the sprinkler, right? So the sprinkler, I cannot turn on the sprinkler on Shabbat, right? Meaning I can't go right now. And I forget the electric aspect of it, which might, a lot of the sprinklers are on timers and what have you. And to press an electric button, so obviously there's the electricity issue, but even without the electricity issue, I can't start the sprinkler, like boom, press it, and then the sprinkler goes on Shabbat. So in the olden days, I remember I used to do this. We used to have a hose that was connected to a garden sprinkler, right? And you turn on the hose, and that's how you water the garden. You can't do that, right? So that for sure you can't do. But what if I do it on a timer, right? Which a lot of sprinkler systems are on a timer. So on a timer, it's a lot less of a problem because I'm not touching anything. I'm not doing anything. It's kind of like me turning the lights on and off, right? Not a problem. So where could it be a problem? So it could be a problem if people don't know that that's the case, right? If people don't realize that that's how your sprinklers work. I have to think that today everyone knows that that's how sprinklers work, right? No one, if you see the sprinkler going on outside my house, I don't think people think that that I just turned on the sprinkler. I think most people know that most sprinkler systems today are on timer, and therefore I think it's not a problem. That said, given that it's on a timer, and given that we could pick, usually with a timer, you could pick the days that it goes on and off. I could tell you in my house, I make a point of, I have something in deal. I make a point of the timer of it not going on Shabbat. Not that it couldn't, but once I'm saying I'm going to do it every third day anyway, so I make a point of not having it go on Shabbat. I have it go on, let's say, Sunday, Wednesday, Friday, and that's it. And if you can set that up, I think that's appropriate, because even though I don't think it's a problem in the sense that you made a sin by doing it, I don't think you do. At the same point in time, we do have to concern ourselves with how things look and what people understand and what message people get. If someone sees that the sprinkler is running outside my house, do they now think that it is allowed to run the sprinkler? They might. They really might think that. One other thing that I think comes up that I thought someone might ask, but no one did, which is, the halakha doesn't usually think of this, but a lot of times we use water for what we'll call entertainment, right? So can I turn my sprinkler system on so that the kids could run in the sprinkler on a hot day? Not on Shabbat, right? You can't do that, right? Can my kids have a water fight on my front lawn? Not really, not on Shabbat, because when they're doing that, they're basically, they're definitely watering the grass. They're definitely going to be putting water balloon fight and so on. I think swimming pools are not a problem. I think that they don't really lead to water really getting onto grass in any significant way. But, I think those are things that also probably have to be analyzed and thought about. But again, the point that I really want to make, and then we stop here with this piece, is you're not allowed to water the grass on Shabbat. That's a straight, very serious from the Torah, melacha. It's like clear, obvious, and so on. So we have to be careful. Sometimes we don't realize that some of the things that we do lead to that or become that, and we have to be careful not to do that. Any questions on that before I move on to the next topic? Good.
Rabbi, if it's off topic and we'll hit it later, we can hit it later. But if we have a gardener and he comes on a Saturday, we can hit it now or we can hit it later.
No, I think it's a good thing. Look, we already talked about workers working for me on Shabbat in a previous class. This was before we started the videos. This was back in the shul, but I think it definitely is worth doing. So first of all, when he does work for me, already it's a step removed from what's forbidden. What do I mean? From the Torah, we learned that it's not asur for the goy to do work for me, right? I'm not even going to talk about gardening, although gardening certainly we're going to get to in a second, right? In other words, let's take lighting a fire, right? Straight from the Torah, you can't light a fire, light a match, right? So for me, I can't do that. If I do that, that's very serious. But what if I turn to my friend LeBron, and I say, LeBron, do me a favor, light this match for me, right? From the Torah, I didn't do anything. What's wrong? He's not responsible for Shabbat. I am, right? I can't have my animal do it, as we learned recently, right? Because I am responsible for my animal not doing work from the Torah, right? But not my non-Jewish friend, right? Or even worker. However, the Chachamim understood, and I think we all understand the Chachamim are wise. We sometimes we have to look to see where their wisdom is. This one, we don't have to look very hard. They said, listen, if we let LeBron do anything for me, right? There's LeBron, and then there's Maria, and then there's this one and that one. There's 8,000 non-Jews around me every day. there'll be no Shabbat, right? I'll be able to do anything and everything that I want, or that the Torah doesn't want me to be doing on Shabbat, because I'll just have my non-Jewish guy walk around with me, right? So the Chachamim said that you can't have a non-Jew do what you're not allowed. Now, that's what I just showed you is very significant. It's still not allowed, but it becomes dirabanan and not from the Torah. And so sometimes when something is dirabanan, there's ways to be more lenient with it, especially if you can find other aspects of it that give us other areas for leniency. So that's a key thing to remember when we're talking about a non-Jew doing something for me. Now, one of the problems with a non-Jew doing something for me is not only this issue of eliminating Shabbat. There's another issue, which is if he's doing it for me, it looks like you're allowed to do it on Shabbat. So there's things that we say that a non-Jew could do, but usually it's not something that easily gets ascribed to him doing it for me, right? That it's directly benefiting me. So for example, I could take my coat and drop it to the tailor, right? Because if anyone were to see the tailor, not on Shabbat, but like from before Shabbat, and he could work on it on Shabbat, because if anyone were to see the tailor working on it on Shabbat, no one would say, oh, he's sewing a Jew's, coat. Now it's interesting because that may not be true of certain types of clothing, right? Like let's say he's working on my tzitzit, right? And then already it's a problem. Or if, I live in Bnei, and I wear long black coats that only particular rabbis wear, well, then you see him working on that. It's also might be a problem. But most of our stuff, that doesn't become an issue. But where does it become an issue? It becomes an issue where he does the work by me, right? So we talked about this, like, for example, someone asked, can I have a non-Jew come to my house and clean my car, right? Cleaning my car on Shabbat, it's a great day to clean the car because I'm not using it. So let him come and clean the car and do all that he has to do. All other days of the week, it's a lot harder. Can't do it because it's in my driveway and everyone will see he's doing it for me. He's doing the work for me on Shabbat. So that's usually going to be a problem for doing gardening work as well. Because if I see the people gardening on my front lawn on Shabbat, everyone sees it. I walk home from shul and the guy's there and I'm, it's so really we should be telling our gardeners not to come on Shabbat. They should not come on Shabbat. They should not do any of the gardening work on Shabbat. Let them come on Tuesday, on Friday, on lots of other days. But on Shabbat, we should not have our gardeners come on Shabbat. And even if we tell them, come once or twice a month, and whenever they choose and what have you, we should tell them, and please don't come on Saturday. And even if they come on Saturday, we should tell them, guys, thanks for coming, but I asked you not to come on Saturday. Please don't come on Saturday. So, really, the gardener on Shabbat is a no-go. And I have to say another thing about it, which is not a halakha per se, but on Shabbat, especially in like if you're out in Jersey, right? You like to sit outside. You like that's a nice part of Shabbat. And to have the lawnmowers and the things, for me or for my neighbors, I think actually takes away from Shabbat. So I wouldn't call that a halachic consideration really, but like one of those things that like, hey, let's think about what we could do extra for the environment of Shabbat. Having people come and do the lawn or other things, I think takes away from our environment of Shabbat. So we have to be careful what we do when we have non-Jewish workers on Shabbat. An area where it's no problem to have a non-Jewish worker on Shabbat, I'll give you a few. One is a lifeguard, right? A lot of people will hire lifeguards, to come on Shabbat. So there's ways that we have to do it, and there's things we have to do, but the person's not doing anything forbidden. So how we pay them is a different question. We talked about that in another time. But the person's not doing any forbidden work, no problem, right? A waiter or waitress who's cleaning up, they're not doing any forbidden work. Those things are permitted. But there's lots of things that create an environment that we have to ask ourselves, So, I certainly the gardener is definitely a no. I think DJ is a no. That doesn't work either. We have to think about things of what contributes to the right environment for Shabbat. Shabbat and we've been talking about very technical legal laws, and that's very, very important. And sometimes people look at the technical legal and lose the big picture. We should always remember not to lose the big picture, and to try and create that spirit environment that the day is different. And sometimes something that's, quote, allowed maybe isn't an intelligent thing to do. It's not the wise thing to do because we're trying to create something else. We're trying to make something else happen. Anyway, we'll stop here for today on that. And tomorrow we'll start talking about the concept of cutting things off trees and so on.
Rabbi, if somebody is building a home, he has to tell the contractor not to come on Shabbat?
Yeah, so we talked about that as well. Yes, a person should not build their home on Shabbat, even though sometimes I could find leniencies, I would not. And I've had a number of circumstances where people have asked me. I've even been in situations where people that haven't asked me, but have, I lived on the block or in the neighborhood, and you see they're working on it. It really, that's another item that disrupts the environment of the Shabbat, not only for the person's not living there, but for the other people on the block. They're walking outside, they're sitting around on their porch, they're talking, having a nice Shabbat, and the hammering and the sawing and listen, if it's a non-Jewish guy in a non-Jewish house, what are you going to do? But when it's Joey Dweck or whatever, I'm just making up a rough name, but if it's some guy that's us, then we feel that, we own that, and it ruins the environment. And most of the places where we live, we know what that means, and really we shouldn't do it. And so when we hire a contractor, we should say, look, there's certain days I don't want you to work, and it includes Shabbat and the Jewish holidays,
Thank you.
No problem.
Baruch, Rabbi. Good morning, guys.
Suppose you have a very nice neighbor and they're cutting their grass on Shabbat. Could you go and tell them anything, or is it?
It's not a halakha question that you're asking. It's a what relationship do you have with your neighbor? I would, but I think that's a question of, do you have a good relationship with your neighbor, right? Like if you got into a fight yesterday about something else, that may not be the day, but
it's no halakha.
If you have a good relationship, yeah, it happens, Look, I have a neighbor just this week, and I'm a little over here, I'm sorry, but just this week I had a neighbor who